Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Today, I am speaking with Crystal Townsend. Crystal Townsend attended the Carolina Springs Academy in South Carolina from 1999 to 2001, and she also attended the Provo Canyon School in Orem, Utah, which is now in, I believe, Springfield, Utah, from 2002 to 2004. And I want to welcome Crystal to the show. Thank you for being here to
Thank you,
tell
Jason.
your story. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just basically start from the beginning. If you want to start from why you went there, you know, your background beforehand, your times there, and how your life has been afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Yeah,
Go right ahead.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
So I'm a native of San Francisco, and still live here. So when I was not quite 5 years old, my family, most of my immediate family, passed away quite suddenly.
Wow.
And I was left in the care of a family friend who later legally adopted me. And she's a very kind woman, but just was not prepared to raise a kid like me. You know, I was pretty deeply traumatized. I'd lost my whole family. I was also coming from a pretty strong family and history of mental illness and behavioral disorders, which, you know, was something I coped with. And, you know, she is somebody that came from a very wholesome background, you know, not filled with trauma as mine had been. And, you know, as a single parent, just really wasn't equipped to raise me, frankly. She did the best that she could, but I mean, as time went on, you know, I was with her from about when I was 5 until when I was, I guess about 12 was when I started going in and out of hospitals, teen homes, you know, kind of halfway home type situations.
Right.
You know, things were really escalating. I did great academically, but behaviorally, I really suffered. You know, I just, I think I felt really out of control over my parents dying, and used rule breaking as a means to exert control. And she just was, you know, totally out of her depth. I mean, you know, I went to therapists. They didn't really know what to do with me. You know, my relationship with her had escalated to the point where, you know, she was raised old school. So, you know, CP was, you know, it's normalized. You know, we're still talking about the, you know, early mid 90s, you know. So, yes. I mean, just you throw all that together, and I mean, things were getting pretty bad. Eventually, CPS was called a couple of times. You know, I covered for her, of course, because, you know, you love your parents,
right? And
you don't understand what abuse is at that time. You don't understand what toxic relationships are. You know, so naturally, you know, around when I was 12, you know, therapists, professionals started suggesting, you know, maybe you need to send her off, you know. And so that's what happened. I ended up being sent to Carolina Springs Academy. It was a WASPs program. I was sent there in 99. So we're talking about, you know, AOL days of the internet, you know, when, you know, when you fired things up and man, that whole house, you know, the whole house would just start shaking from the sound of your your modem, you know, ba-dong, da-dong, da-dong. So, you know, of course, like there was no way for people to research. You know, research was you got a brochure in the mail. So they didn't know the things that, you know, I doubt that people really knew what was going down at these schools. And, you know, you send a bunch of misbehaving kids there and they tell you that something's really wrong. And then the adults that you've been paying tens of thousands of dollars to take care of these kids tell you, oh, they're lying. You know, we're not mistreating animals. We're not mistreating humans. You know, we're not starving your kids or putting them into isolation, you know? Yeah, like, you know, it all makes sense. It's a perfect storm. Of course, like these things have been going on for decades. Anyhow, so I got sent to Carolina Springs Academy. I was there for almost 2 years. And I don't really know why I was taken out. To this day. I suspect that my adoptive parent ran out of money. I know that she's paying out of pocket. Like, I mean, a lot of parents paid out of, you know, they may have had some insurance money to pay for these places, but they ended up paying out of pocket in the end. And so they ended up plowing through, you know, I hear of so many kids, or sorry, kids, I call them kids. Most of us are in our 30s and 40s now, you know, but, you know, that was where their whole college tuition went. And so they had no money for education down the road so that they could get a good job once they got out of, you know, their teenage angst.
Was this academy affiliated with any religious organization?
Not officially, but
no? Okay.
Not officially, but you know, every Sunday, you know, there would be, you know, quote unquote non-denominational worship, but it would be like they would bring in like you know, some preacher that would, you know, encourage you to get born again, and you know, if you know, and if you agreed to get born again in you know, Sunday non-denominational worship, then the next week you got to, you know, move farther in the program and you got more privileges, and everybody said you were making such progress. I saw through that when I was at Carolina Springs Academy. I saw through it pretty quickly, and I've always been a bookworm. I wound up giving up religion while I was at Carolina Springs Academy, and cool baby, oh my hate.
Oh yes.
Yeah, people did not appreciate that whatsoever. It was, I mean, even today, I find it kind of funny. I mean, I found it funny then because I totally like played into it. It was the few like little teenage rebellions I got to do was like, it's not against the rules to not be Christian, so I'm not going to be Christian.
Well, see, the thing with Christians, and I've noticed, it's not a live and let live type of thing. Okay, it's either you're with us or you're against us. That's it.
There's an unfortunate streak of Christianity that's quite wide, a wide streak of Christianity that's like that. I've met some real Christians, and thankfully they're not like that. But unfortunately, there's a big swath of the live like me or I'll let you die.
Or you go to hell, one of the two.
Yeah. I definitely got told I was going to burn in hell on many an occasion.
Well, see, that's what scares the kids. Is hell.
Right.
Let's just say you're going to go to hell where there's fire and brimstone and gnashing of teeth, and you're going to be burned up. Oh, that scares them. Okay, all right, I'll submit to it. You know, but some people are stronger than that. More strong-willed, and no, hell no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It was the same situation at Provo Canyon School. You know, the school wasn't religiously affiliated in an official capacity, but like you put anything in you put anything in Utah, and it's practically sponsored by the Mormon Church. I mean, it's just
it is Utah.
It's Utah. I mean, let's be real, and it's a comparable situation in Idaho and, you know, any of the other LDS enclaves, I guess you could call them, or whatnot.
Right.
But I mean, that was definitely my experience in Utah, was just being surrounded constantly by elements of the LDS church, and having that kind of, I wouldn't say it was shoved down my throat quite so much as when I was in, South Carolina dealing with
Right.
Baptists.
Well, at least they didn't make you wear the magic underwear.
No, they just had us adhere to a dress code that was comparable to the underwear. But
was it a dress? Did you have to wear no pants? Was it with dresses?
No, we weren't permitted to wear dresses of any kind. We had to wear pants.
Wow.
It had to be it was the worst, because we're talking about, the early 2000s here, when everything, all girls' pants were like the hip huggers.
Skin
and so
tight.
It was impossible, and skin tight, which none of that was dress code. And so it made it impossible to shop. Some of us that are parents weren't savvy or willing to put their kids in, stylish clothing. They got sent straight up Dockers. Can you imagine the mortification of a 16-year-old girl wearing pleated Dockers khakis because that's the only thing that fits dress code? Meanwhile, the girl that she's bunking with, has her parents took the time to actually go out shopping and find the thing that fit dress code. So
it could have been. It could have been worse. It could have been those cowboy strangler jeans, those Wrangler ones.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that a couple girls got mortified with those back then. So I went to. So let's see, getting things back on track to the timeline.
Right.
So I was in South Carolina from 99 to 2001. And Carolina Springs Academy was Tranquility Bay Light. So It was, we weren't showering outside.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the school buildings were prefabricated buildings.
Okay.
And, so we're talking, very little insulation or ventilation. It was on the site of an old plantation, with a bunch of ramshackle buildings on it. Some of them dating literally back to the Civil War. And, and it was just all the WASP's programs, it was just very shady and a lot like a Hydra, in that, once social services really started cracking down and closing down these places, another one would rear up right in its place. Carolina Springs Academy was shut down after one of the, school buildings burnt to the ground. It was an electrical fire, I believe. Got shut down shortly after the electrical fire. And I believe there's another school operating there today in the exact same location. And last I checked, being staffed by former therapists from Provo Canyon School, which just goes to show you how deep the web of this goes.
Yeah.
It's it's chilling. It's chilling.
Now, are these licensed therapists?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
The doctor who treated me at Provo Canyon School was a licensed. I recall her being a doctor. I remember medical licenses on her wall. But she's a sick person. Which I'm saying this because I'm not going to say her name, in our interview, but
yes.
I was treated by a sick person. And her methods caused so much irreparable damage, not just to myself, but to my adoptive parent and to the other children and people in her care. And so it's just, to me, the most horrible thing of all is just knowing that there's so many of these so-called medical professionals, people that have degrees from schools, people that swore an oath to heal.
The Hippocratic Oath, yes.
Yeah, and that they continue to practice today. It's so disturbing to me.
So, 2001, you leave Carolina Springs Academy.
Right. I went home. I came back to San Francisco for about 6 months.
That's what I was going to ask you, because you went back with the Provo in 2002.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So there was about a 6-month gap where I came back to San Francisco. I attended a parochial high school. Pretty much immediately, I wasn't getting into like big trouble. Like again, like still, doing great academically. I'm on the what is it? Not the track and field, cross country team, and I'm on the cross country team. And it's just, it's just minor acts of rebellion. It's like, my adoptive parent tells me that she doesn't want me wearing certain shoes with my school uniform, and I wear the shoes anyways. Or, she didn't like my boyfriend. Like, I'm not out here doing, I wasn't out there doing a bunch of drugs or partying or getting drunk or, being promiscuous or engaging in anything that would be considered like really unhealthy teenage behavior. Like it's pretty standard,
normal, healthy rebellion. Normal. I mean, like every teenager.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, but it didn't matter. To her, she just saw, portents of disaster. And so, I mean, immediately, like it was, right back into institutions, right back, and it, it was a pretty quick slide from institution into Provo Canyon School. And so I went there February of 2002. So it was very early 2002. It might have been late January. And I think everyone really expected it to be a short stay. I mean, Provo Canyon School was, arguably a lot more posh. I mean, I think that, she was really thinking like, okay, this doesn't look quite so bad. It's not way out on a rural farm, seems like closer to home, maybe I'll get to visit her more. And just, I don't think that anyone really anticipated how the program was really designed to sabotage and keep students in it.
Okay.
Especially students like myself, like, kids who are ADHD, kids who are highly intelligent, kids who are naturally prone to just being generally rebellious, not necessarily, doing drugs or being, engaging in promiscuous or highly sexual, inappropriate behavior for a teenager. Like we're just talking about like kids who just have a hard time focusing because like, they TikTok a little too quickly. And I mean, those kids really got it the worst there, because it's just, they kept you there by keeping you in trouble. And so it was never big trouble. It was the little trouble, day to day. It was just the hospital corner not done right, the underwear not quite being 90 degrees, a stray hair on the sink, and then of course, like it's once again, like, both places had the level system that you hear of that's, very typical to programs of these types. And so you've got, where there's just this baked in system of, oh, it's encouraged to engage in this like tough love type of thing by, being tough on the lower levels. And then if you're tough on them, it shows you really love them. And so you get brought to upper levels. And so it's just like this baked in thing where the students are encouraged to hold each other down like lobsters in a tank at like a Chinese restaurant, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it's like. Like you're just incentivized to hold down the people around you. And I mean, I engaged in the same behavior. I was unnecessarily harsh to the other students around me. And I hate to say it, it was a mentality that I carried into my adulthood, where I continued to view social situations as being like a lobster tank. Maybe not consciously, but I certainly acted that way.
Right.
You know, I was quick to put down people and very suspicious, you know. It's something that I still work on every day. So I mean, that's just kind of how Provo Canyon and how Carolina Springs Academy were, you know, the staff almost didn't need to do much. They just needed to poke the right people, and everybody else stayed in line.
What was the method of discipline? Did they hit you with a board? Did they smack you? What was?
No, it was, that's,
okay.
That's the thing is they didn't need to restrain every single girl
Okay.
with multiple people and give her sedatives. They didn't need to put every single girl into isolation. They didn't need to make every single girl live on a diet of you know, oatmeal or whatnot. It was enough to see one or two girls. And it was the psychological intimidation of that cut through. I never got tackled to the ground, but I'll never forget some of the takedowns that I saw. That still scares me.
Sometimes mental trauma is far worse than physical trauma.
And that's the point that I want to make, is that it's so easy to get hung up on the physical trauma that occurred, because that's the easiest stuff to circle and say, that right there, that's where they broke the law and they did the bad thing. But I mean, that's, and that did horrible things. It's horrible, but witnessing that is, you know, I don't want to say just as damaging, but
right.
It damages you.
Physical abuse can, you know, cuts, bruises, whatever, they heal. Mental abuse, it takes years. Sometimes,
well, they both do.
Yes, sometimes people don't get over it. Sometimes,
right?
It just depends on the person.
Right.
So sometimes mental abuse can last a lifetime.
Right. Exactly.
And if you're a teenager, you know, you got a long life ahead of you. That's a lot of wasted years right there, because of, you know, so.
Yeah, it blows my mind that, you know, a cumulative, 4 years of my life has had such a lasting impact on the relationships with my family, on my relationships with friends, on my romantic relationships, on my life goals. It's affected everything.
Right.
You know, there's nothing in my life that hasn't been touched by, you know, that period of my life, which, you know, is, doesn't seem like that much. You know, you think like 4 years, like, it seems like should be a blink of an eye, but it's like,
well, before you go on,
yeah,
I want to clarify something for the people that are watching. I'm sure they're going to say, well, wasted time. What does he mean by that? What I mean by wasted time is, instead of, you know, going through your teenage years and living a normal life, like you said, having a wonderful, exciting, vibrant life, Now you're having to go to therapists. Now you're scared all the time. You're suspicious all the time. That's just wasted time. Is what I mean by that. Just in case anybody, I don't want them to get the wrong idea on that. So
Yeah.
I want to clarify it.
No, yeah, absolutely.
People could be critical sometimes of that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
It's all good. It's all good. And I think it's also your personal perspective. It's some people say like, oh God, I spent like X, amount of money on therapy, or I spent X amount of money on drugs or alcohol, or, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have people on the other end, they're like, well, it made me the person I am today. And I mean, for me, it's like, it depends on what day of the week it is. some days I'm looking at my bank account, or, and my savings, and I'm like, man, I really wish I could have gotten my act together a bit quicker. But, at the same time, it's like, I had no support net, I had no support net. And I left Provo Canyon School shortly before I was 18. And, my exit plan, I had to figure that out myself. I, like many other Provo Canyon School students, I was given very serious psychiatric medication that was really not appropriate for the conditions that I had, at the time. And that medication was so, basically made me ineligible for the military. So here, I'm about to turn 18. I've been not allowed by the therapist that was, in charge of my care, would not permit me to apply for college or for any kind of, aid, when it became very clear that I would be aging out of the school and that I was not welcome back with my adoptive parent. I was not allowed to look for college. I was ineligible for the military because of the psychiatric medications that I had been, basically lab ratted through.
Right.
So my only option was Job Corps. And I almost wasn't even able to go to Job Corps because another attendee of the school had gone to Job Corps shortly before me. And there was an incident. I don't know what it was, but I was almost homeless with only the money that I had earned doing janitor work at Provo Canyon School for, I think it was 10 cents an hour. That was the money I was allowed to earn while I was there. Oh, yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
10 cents an hour. You'll go far with that.
Yeah. So one of the privileges that you could earn at Provo Canyon School was the privilege to, I forget what the program was called specifically, but it was essentially a work earn program where you cleaned the school facilities at night. And it was for, I don't recall the exact amount, but it was like something like 10 or 25 cents an hour. I mean, it was under $1. But I worked so that I could save money, so that like I would at least have something in my pocket when I left. I think I had like $200. And this was after being at Provo Canyon School for a couple of years. But that, it's kind of embarrassing, but that work earn program was one of the things that kind of saved my sanity, because it was just like, I know I've got nothing when I leave here. So let me just do this one little thing to make sure that maybe I'll be okay. It was a very scary time.
It almost seems like they tried to blackball you after you left. Like I said, with the job corps and all that.
I have to admit, like I don't want to say this, like, but yeah, I mean, I felt sabotaged. I still do. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I still struggle to find the motivation of my therapist in my time there in disallowing me from applying for college or any kind of financial aid. And she convinced my parent to also actively discourage me from applying for college. I had a 4.0 GPA and managed to win second place in a statewide essay contest in Utah, like all while in boarding school. I mean, I took every educational opportunity that I could because I knew that program, the way that it was structured, I was never getting out. Never. Because I recognized all the signs from Carolina Springs. I mean, I didn't know at the time that Carolina Springs had been structured off of Provo Canyon School. I mean, of course, it made sense when I found out.
Now, were you allowed to call your parent or write?
I was.
And if it was, I mean, if you didn't say what they wanted you to say, did they black out any of the letters or hang up? If you tried to.
It's all of that stuff. All of that kind of stuff happened. It happened at both the WASP program school, the Carolina Springs, and it happened at Provo Canyon School, where.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I had phone calls that were ended early, or there was actually something that was pretty chilling that happened at Carolina Springs Academy. The owner, Narvin Litchfield, which if you get into any of the information about the now defunct WASPs programs, you'll hear about the Litchfields. Mm-hmm. And he had some horses and some hound dogs, some hunting hounds that were on the school grounds, and he left for an international trip and did not leave the animals in proper care, and they starved to skin and bones and were covered in ticks. I mean, you could see every bone in these animals' bodies, and it was horrifying to see. And we were already being subjected to all kinds of just bizarre punishments. And so I had a kind of a code phrase with my adoptive parent. She had told me, if something's ever really off, just kind of drop this phrase in a letter.
Right.
I did it. It was asking after a fake aunt. Right. And so she called, and she wasn't very slick about it and didn't make sure that it would be an unmonitored call. So of course, they plopped me down with a staff member, approximately 2.5 feet away from my face, breathing down my neck while I tell her, oh, well, I guess it was just a dog that, wasn't getting fed enough. Meanwhile, years later, I mean, there's plenty of people that can tell you that Narvin Litchfield, is a serial animal abuser. Shouldn't be locked up. So, I mean, it was just stuff like that. Like, when we did try to tell our parents things, we were silenced, and oh my gosh. And I got into a mess of trouble after that phone call. And it wouldn't have mattered what I said after that. She was never going to believe me again, because they got me to basically lie and say that I wasn't telling the truth when I was.
Yeah.
And and it was unfortunate that there was so much, I guess you could say animosity between myself and my adoptive parent at that point, that, she was far more likely to believe anything an adult told her than what I said. But yeah, the redactions, if we tried to send a letter out that somebody read and said, like, what's this? Like, we'd be hauled into, a therapist's office. Like, why do you feel the need to manipulate your parents like this? You know that you belong here. I mean, just pulling the full-on nurse ratchet. I mean, and just
Yeah.
like, you'd spend an hour in there with this licensed professional, and they'd tell you, how you're lying and you're manipulating, and you really belong here. And by the end of that hour, you kind of believe them.
And maybe you
I mean,
did.
you really kind of do. I did. I mean, and that's part of the reason why I spoke not often about my experiences there. There were things, I mean, I just flat out didn't talk about it at all for, 10 years after I left. And I mean, even today, I mean, there's just so much that I've blocked out,
Right.
Yeah.
So were there male staff there as well?
Yeah. So it was all female students, but it was a mixture of male and female staff.
That's not good.
No, it's not. It's really not.
Some of those guys can be a little creepy sometimes.
I don't understand the motivation personally. I'm like, so like, what compelled you to go and apply for a job to be like a warden to a bunch of like teenage girls?
I wonder.
Seems a bit odd.
It doesn't take a genius to figure that one out.
Yeah. And I think the other scary thing is, a lot of those staff weren't much older than we were. We're talking 17, 18-year-old kids and, 23-year-old staff, 22, 23-year-old staff.
Yeah.
That's just troubling. It's troubling. And just the and it was the taunting and things like that would happen, because you stick everybody together like that, and it totally turns into a prison, a inmate guard situation. I mean,
Right.
I think the phrase Stockholm syndrome gets tossed around an awful lot.
Yes, it does.
when talking about TTI, and it's absolutely the truth. Yeah.
None of those male staff ever made advances to the girls or anything like that. No problems with that. That's a big thing too. I mean, that kind of abuse is also traumatizing too.
Absolutely. In my experiences, I never dealt with any male staff personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so much in denial that I didn't really listen when somebody said something that might have insinuated that somebody else might have been dealing with a similar situation.
Right.
Also, there was just such a strong culture of like snitching on each other being really encouraged, that, I mean, I think that most of us were just far too afraid to really say anything. Something was really running, not going right. I have read some things in survivor testimonials about staff that I distinctly recall, like, oh yeah, I remember that male staff, but I can't attest to anything personally.
Right. No, I know that this place has changed hands many times. I think 3 times now.
Yeah.
And I went to the website and I got their statement that they have on there now. And this is what it says. It says, please note that PCS was sold by its previous ownership in August of 2000. I guess it was owned by a couple of guys, Jack Williams and Robert Christ.
Yes.
And then it went, some hospital or some treatment center took ownership of it. And now it's changed hands again. It says, we therefore cannot comment on the operations or patient experience prior to that time. So in other words, with all these allegations coming out or whatever, okay, now, oh wait, it's changed hands. We don't know anything about it. Now it goes from that to completely changing the subject. Well, we are committed to providing high quality care to youth with special and often complex emotional, behavioral, and psychiatric needs. In other words, we wash our hands.
Yeah, it's
the fault of the previous owners.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I will say that so when I attended the school in 2002, 2004, if that is the Robert Christ that I am thinking of, and I'll have to do some more research, he was absolutely still involved. Is that Robert Christ? Is he a psychiatrist? Were you able to take a look?
No, I wasn't. I'll just.
All right. He may be. Let me see. I may need to. I'm just going to double check because there was definitely a Dr. Christ there. You don't forget a name like that.
It said the original owners, Jack Williams and Robert Christ. So.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Of course, I've seen some of the forums with some survivor stories, and they talk about over-medicating people where they kind of felt like zombies when they were walking around.
Yes.
So
I was one of those people. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Robert Christ was involved with the school 2002 to 2004 when I was there. So he may not have been an owner, but he was there.
Involved somehow,
involved in that he overprescribed medication to me. And overprescribed medication to other girls. I remember my first week there being in an English class, and the girl next to me, and we're talking about, this is like 10 a.m. in the, so no reason for a teenage girl who hasn't been at a party the night before to be completely slumped over her desk, unresponsive to verbal or physical, like people trying to shake her awake. She was completely passed out because she had been overprescribed. I believe it was lithium. I don't know for sure, but I was given lithium, and I will tell you that having been on that medication, it makes you pretty much unresponsive. In order to even be able to function day to day on it, you have to build a tolerance. But until you build that tolerance, you're like the Walking Dead. Like you really cannot even walk straight. It
like
turns
a zombie.
like you look like a cast member from The Walking Dead, like minus the brains part.
Right.
Or it's more just like sleep, So, but that's what it's like. It was, any time that they felt like you just were not acting how they wanted you to act, and if there was money to do it, if there was a fund to put you on more medication, because these were just like, there was the basic tuition, and then they threw on the medication and all these extra things as more costs. And so of course there's a huge incentive there for them to pile on medication, which is exactly what they did.
Right.
I remember at one point, I had a hard time sleeping for like maybe a couple nights in a row, and offhand mentioned it and immediately got a sleeping pill prescription. I didn't need to be on sleeping pills. I just mentioned that I'd been having a hard time sleeping, which of course I'm in a horrible boarding school. Like,
and then they wonder why sometimes people, when they're being prescribed these drugs, why they go to drugs, because they can't get these prescription drugs, so they got to go to something else because, you, like any other drug, you get hooked on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And there's also side effects to this medication.
Yeah.
So.
I know for me, due to my experience at Provo Canyon School, I was very averse to using psychotropic medications for a long time, because I was so afraid of having another. Because all the medications I got put on there was either like zombie or sugar pill, and like nothing helped because they would put me on an antidepressant because I said that I was depressed. Well, of course I'm depressed. Like, I'm being deprived of a normal teenage life.
Right.
So then when that didn't work, they'd be like, okay, here, let's stick you on an antipsychotic. Like, I never needed to be on antipsychotics. That's a joke. So then afterwards, like that was, because that was my whole experience of psychiatrists. Like, yeah, I was very therapy averse for a long time, which meant that I didn't deal with my trauma. And I think that's like what a lot of, so-called ex-program kids deal with, is that we leave these programs and now we really need treatment in from an actual professional. And we don't want to get it because we've been dealing with the likes of, Dr. Robert Christ, who, over-medicated people. In my opinion, I'm just going to say that in my opinion, he over-medicated people.
Now there's a trust issue. There's a trust issue now. Like I said, when you leave the school,
absolutely.
you can't going to trust a therapist now because the therapist that was there, or a doctor or whatever. So it's and so it's no wonder that people leave these these troubled teen farms and they're not successful later on. It's like, well, no, it's not just a one and done thing. If somebody has trauma that they're dealing with, that's a lifelong journey. Yeah.
But here you've burned them from therapists, so they don't even want to go to the doctor. Like, it's right. Yeah, it's sad.
I guess instead of sitting down on the couch with a therapist, it's probably cheaper to just shove a pill down your throat and be done with it. Seems like it.
I don't think it's really even about, I think in America, sadly, it does end up oftentimes being about money. I know plenty of people that, have self-medicated using illicit drugs or alcohol because they were therapy averse or didn't have the money or the medical coverage to go to therapy. But that's,
right.
That's a whole other issue. I think it's tragic that here we've got this double-edged sword of, kids that are, now adults that have gone through these programs, are deeply traumatized by them, have left, become therapy averse, and then also have been, unsuccessful, in their lives. And so then can't even afford the therapy or can't maintain the job because, to get the employer therapy program or whatnot, because they've been so traumatized by this program experience. It just goes so much beyond the things that happen to us there, because the life, the effects just keep going and going. I think of the people that I know that are, I feel like I've been lucky. I eventually got over my therapy, averseness or whatnot. And, went to therapy, kind of dealt with some things. I'm still dealing. But I just think of the people that aren't being given that opportunity to heal, to work through the things that happen to us there, which is extra hard because there's just this strong culture of victim blaming around it, because so many people hear, oh, you got sent off to boarding school, like your parents paid fancy money for you to go to a fancy private place. Like, give me a break, you're not traumatized.
Right.
I've had to tell people like at least here in California, we're a little more familiar with the history of the Native American boarding schools. And I've had to tell people like, no, it's something a little closer to the Native American boarding schools, where it's, these were places that stripped identity from developing minds and gave them traumas that would last the rest of their lives, that made it so that they would go home and be shunned by their families. It's the only thing I can think of, compare it to that, or maybe to jail.
Well, sometimes I've heard in other interviews that jail is better than some of these boarding schools.
I was likely gonna slip that comment in at some point or another. It's just like when Orange Is the New Black was on, or I've seen other jail shows. I'm just like, man, they get that. We didn't get that in boarding school.
Right.
Like, I would have loved to have had that.
Cable TV,
so better.
Right?
Yeah,
Rec,
exactly.
cable TV. So
right, yeah, yeah. So I think I want to take some time talking about this, because it was probably the most damaging thing that happened to me in my time at Provo Canyon School. So it was not unusual. Well, it was somewhat usual for a student who was deemed as needing a little, extra push to be put on a special program. And these special programs ranged from you've got a girl that comes in that was engaged in inappropriate sexual behavior before she entered the school.
Okay.
And so, they strapped her with, a fake pregnancy belly sandbag for a couple of months. And then after that, she got one of those, like the baby dolls that they gave out home ec, that cry and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they gave her one of those. And, keep in mind, we're in rooms where, it's like stacked bunks. It's 3-4 girls to a room. So this girl would have this crying baby doll that would wake up everybody in the whole dorm for a month or two, or until the therapist decides that, she's done with this program. Right. So you have ones like that. But then you have more unusual ones where you have a student who is deemed to not think enough before they talk. So they have to write down everything on a notepad before they say it. But the one that I got put on was just no talk, which meant that I was not allowed to speak to anyone, including staff, unless it was expressly related to a bodily function or just an absolute emergency. But I was not permitted to speak to any student. No students were permitted to speak to me. No sign language, no writing things down, no Pictionary, nothing like that. They weren't even allowed to look at me practically. I was put on that program for months, and this is a program that is very easy to, it's easy to get in trouble on. So, you've got these, you've got this sort of demerit program. So it'd be like, oh, Crystal tried to communicate with me with her eyes, so we're going to give her X amount of demerits. And so it just, go on and it escalate and escalate and escalate. And so, I wound up on this program for months on end. I don't remember at this point how long it was, but it was, I want to say it was 6 months.
It almost seems like they're setting you up for failure.
It was very much like that. It felt like sabotage. And that's why I say these programs were designed to keep the students there until the money ran out. These programs were not designed for people to succeed. They were designed for compliance and to suck the funds dry.
It was a moneymaker.
It was a moneymaker.
Yes.
So imagine, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old teenage girl not being permitted to interact with people around her for months on end. You know,
Yeah.
these people are all around me. So, you know, it was like being a ghost. You know, I wasn't even permitted to, I would go to class. I wouldn't be allowed to speak in class. It was, I mean, it's just, that's not a humane thing to do. That's not therapeutic. So eventually, you know, the trouble built up so much that I landed up, you know, they had a special dorm for the trouble kids. So I wound up in the trouble kids dorm. It's called investment. And, you know, I kept getting in trouble. And like, I mean, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, but again, it's like, I mean, this is a self-sabotaging thing. And meanwhile, you know, my so-called therapist is determining that I'm still being manipulative. I'm not changing enough. I'm not being compliant enough. And so finally, you know, I'm stuck in a room by myself at this point. You know, I'm not permitted to interact with people. I'm only allowed, you know, I'm allowed into a closed gym, an enclosed gym. So no outside time, for an hour a day in which I'm permitted to walk laps. It was around that time when I was put on lithium, and I remembered seeing the other people on lithium and how they were. And I took the lithium once or twice and I saw it doing it to me. And so I started cheeking it, and I hid the pills in my pillowcase and I kept them. I think I saved them up for about a month and a half, maybe 7 weeks. And I took them all one night because I didn't want to live anymore. I saw no way out. I wasn't allowed to apply for college. I wasn't ever going to be able to go home from what I could see. I was never going to go back to a teenage life. I was going to, like, from what I could see, my life was just being sent down a road that there was no return. And I saw no way out from the thumb of this therapist person that was in charge of me, or from the school. And so I took this handful of lithium and just kind of trusted. I was like, you know, if I'm meant to wake up in the morning, we'll see, but I don't really want to. I did obviously wake up the next day. I was pretty incapacitated. I remember screaming, being unable to see or really move my body other than screaming. And the staff were just like, you know, they were ready to take me down and restrain me and medicate me further. And I managed to stutter out that I had intentionally overdosed on the lithium. At which point they put me in a room that it's called observation, or OBS for short. I think if anyone's seen the Paris Hilton doc, they know about the observation room. It's a 7-walled room, cement floor, cinder block walls, painted in beige. I was there for a week, in a t-shirt and shorts, out of my mind. Just, I think they let me, I don't think I was there for a week, but that next week is very blurry. I was out of my mind for a week. And through it all, was made to just kind of, you know, be led around, you know, frog marched around and made to go through some kind of routine when it was very clear that I needed to be on bed rest from having overdosed. Meanwhile, they're like,
that's a lot of lithium you took.
Yeah, no, and meanwhile, they're like, no, here's your history book, write an essay, do this test, do these math assignments. And I'm so thankful that, you know, out of all the staff at Provo Canyon School, I think, you know, some of the teachers I had really kind of saved my sanity in a way that, you know, and that they were compassionate and understanding. I mean, I remember my history and my English teacher both just being like, listen, you can make up these assignments at a later time. And I remember one of them giving the assignment back to me, and it was jarring. I mean, I barely remembered writing it, but it was just this complete mess of, I think it was supposed to be about like the Emancipation Proclamation, and I talked a lot about slaves growing rice and beans. So but I try to find the humor in it now, but it's just like, I mean, that's not what you do. So, yeah, overall, I mean, I think that was one of the most like horrible things that happened was, being unable to speak or interact with anybody for months on end, and then, trying to take my own life and just being met with more punishment because because of the suicide attempt, because suicide attempts are against the rules. I had to stay in the bad kid dorm longer because I survived my suicide attempt.
How dare you cut off the gravy train? We want your money.
Yeah.
I'm sure
no kidding, right?
I'm sure that's how they looked at it. I'm sure.
Yeah. Who knows? I genuinely don't understand how to the motivation is just beyond money, like, and how, I don't know. So, so the special programs that they would put us on, I mean, those would really mess with you. Cause I mean, they would do stuff like, oh gosh, I'm recalling, your interview with, the fellow that was at Agave, where he talked about the kid that was on like a beginning level for like 9 months.
Okay. I believe that was, Jay Frazier, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize. I got them mixed up.
It could have been. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, just that kind of incessant needling, like sadistic behavior from people that, like, why? It's just, I don't know. It really blows my mind.
Like I said,
so
they don't want you to succeed. They don't. It's all part of the plan, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. So yeah, I ended up leaving Provo Canyon School about a week before my 18th birthday. I was able to find a Job Corps center that was willing to take me, and despite the former problems with other school alumni, and I was there for about 10 months, and then returned to California. And I mean, I'm really thankful. I left Provo Canyon School with about $200 in my pocket, and that chance to go to Job Corps, and really had nothing else to my name. And Job Corps provided me with a graduation stipend of, I think it was like $1,200 or something. So just, I mean, that saved me when I came back to California, because I came back here, I'd hoped to fix things with my adoptive parent. It didn't really work out. So, I ended up on my own. And if it hadn't been for that Job Corps money, I would have been homeless, and thankfully I was able to, move in with some friends and things like that and get on my feet. But I mean, it's, I don't understand how a school like Provo Canyon can say that they're setting people up for success. They were willing to let me go to a homeless shelter. I mean,
yeah.
It's just
like I said, I think it's just all about the money. How much money
It really is.
can we siphon out of your bank account? That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they they,
Absolutely.
they don't care about you. They don't. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of these other
And
troubled teen homes.
yeah, and yeah, and that's the thing is the thing is too that really scares me, and I was thinking about this earlier today, just kind of recounting some specific memories. Was that to this day, I don't know what lies or how many were told to my adoptive parent. So I know of some of the lies, and I've been able to straighten some things out. But there's a rift there that I don't know how to heal. I mean, especially because it took so long to get to a point where she might even believe that I wasn't making it up. And so now to not even know like what errors need to be corrected, how do you heal? It's
Does she know about what's going on right now with protests and Paris Hilton and all that stuff?
I don't know.
Oh.
We don't talk much very more.
Okay.
Or we don't talk much very more. We don't talk very much anymore. I confronted her a few years ago about the schools, and it's she wasn't aware of a lot of things. That I realized that when I confronted her was when I realized that a lot of lies had been told.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was that to untangle all of it would require work on both our ends, and it's hard to explain that to somebody when your role your whole life has been the problem child.
Right.
To try and explain to somebody like, no, you got traumatized too. You were manipulated too. You've been lied to, and you need to sit down and talk to somebody about the lies that you were told and how you were manipulated, and to tell somebody that they've been victimized is not an easy conversation, and a lot of times people are not open to that.
That's true. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the situation that I feel that we're in, and unfortunately,
It could be a little guilt. It could be denial.
Yeah, exactly. Column A, column B, all of the above.
Yeah, that could be. I mean,
yeah, there's obviously a lot of anger and resentment,
mm-hmm.
Especially because, one of the reasons, well, actually the only reason I was able to go to Provo Canyon School was because the state of California paid for it. After my family passed away, I spent some time in the foster system, and, prior to being adopted by this friend of the family.
Right.
And so at one point, after my, when I was home between Carolina Springs Academy and Provo Canyon School, when things started going downhill and it became clear that she wanted to ship me off again, she didn't have money at that point to do so. And so there was a phone call that happened one day. She called up some folks from the state of California and told them flat out, in my earshot, if you do not pay for her to go to the school, I will relinquish I will relinquish custody of her and return
Right.
custody to the state. Which I've confronted her about that. It's a rift between us. I don't know if that's ever going to heal. But because of that phone call, the state of California agreed to pay for my tuition at Provo Canyon School. And from what I understand, they paid for other students' tuitions as well. I also understand that there were numerous students at Provo Canyon School from the state of Alaska that were being paid for by the state of Alaska. Yes. There's a lot of state tax money that's being sent to Provo Canyon School. At least there was during the time that I was there, 2002 to 2004. And frankly, I just don't understand why there isn't more oversight from the state of California or the state of Alaska, or any of these other states that are sending children to these schools. Because I certainly never saw anybody walk through and check on our welfare while we were there.
Well,
nobody ever conducted an interview with me.
Either one of two things: either they don't know about it, or they don't want to know about it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've noticed that a lot of these troubled teen homes or boarding schools or whatever they're called now, they destroy a lot of families. Some can be repaired, some are irreparable.
Yeah.
They need to be held responsible for that as well, I believe.
Right.
So.
It's hard to hold an institution responsible for these sorts of intangible damages that happen. But I think that at the very least, private institutions held by wealthy families should not be getting tax money paid for by citizens like me.
Right.
When I'm not seeing anything that these schools are having any kind of oversight, except by local officials who are not going to be in compliance. They're going to be in compliance with local welfare laws, which are not the welfare laws that we have here in California. They're very different, which I think that was something that you and I discussed briefly on the phone.
Yep.
Is one of the reasons why these troubled teen programs are in these, very odd states, is because these are the states where they have the relaxed, child welfare laws. Right. And I think that if states like California or Alaska are going to be sending their money to these private institutions, and they need to be sending their state, their state staff out to be checking in and making sure that these schools are in compliance with the welfare laws of that I voted for.
And one way that it could be done is what we're doing here. Hit them in the pocketbook.
Exactly.
Somebody who's thinking about sending their kid there will probably watch this video and go, oh, maybe not. So
talk to your state officials,
yes.
Whatever state you're in, because it's not just about talking to officials in Utah. It's not just about talking to officials in Idaho or the South, some of these southern states, Georgia, Florida,
yep.
Texas, where you're seeing some of these other schools. It's talking to state officials everywhere, because the tax money is going into these places from everywhere.
That's true.
So yeah,
that's true.
That's definitely where I'm coming from with it, is that trauma damage, personal vendetta aside. I just don't like, I don't like seeing my money that I earn now, my friends' money, my family money, is still going to these places that I don't think that I think that there's a need for treatment centers. I don't agree with the way that they're being run. I think that there's a healthier, better way to do this. I don't have the program on that because that's not my area of expertise, but let's get some more professionals in there, some third-party people to really check in on these places. Because, in regards to Provo Canyon School's recent statement, I can tell you that I have seen allegations of abuse that are far, far more recent than the early aughts. We're talking about stuff that's happened, in the past couple of years, the past 18 months.
Uh-huh.
There's people that are keeping a constant eye on this. So Provo Canyon School, you're not fooling anybody. We're watching you.
Yeah, they need to be regulated more. Stiffer regulations, stiffer penalties, stiffer laws.
I'm sorry. We need to have people going in and checking in on kids, especially in these group situations, it's just, you know, you've got one or two, you know, a small handful of adults watching over a bunch of kids. There's no way that those kids are being properly nurtured.
Right.
I mean, we sit here and talk about, you know, teacher to student ratios. Okay, well, that applies everywhere. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So overall, you're doing pretty good, Crystal?
you know, it's yeah, I would say that, you know, it hasn't been a fairy tale. You know, I had a lot of life goals. You know, I think for me, the part that makes me angriest is that there were so many things that I wanted to do with my life,
Yeah.
that I had to put on hold, that continue to be on hold, because of the experiences, you know, at Carolina Springs Academy, at Provo Canyon School. It's so regrettable the way that my relationships have been affected, but, you know, I feel like there's always opportunity to keep working. I will say that it's been a very odd highlight of 2020 to have so many people speaking so openly about this, to have the hashtag breakingcodesilence become a thing, to you know, have someone like Paris Hilton, which, you know, granted, she isn't the knight that I asked for, but she's, or the hero that I asked for necessarily. She's the one we got, and, you know, hey, hats off to her. Thank you. I
Yes.
guess that's great, and I'm really thankful to the people that went out and protested in at the school the other day. I wish I could have gone out there with them. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to, you know, seeing what this push in the media brings. You know, hopefully it brings around some real legislative change.
The movement seems to be growing pretty quickly, which
It
is good.
does. It's mind blowing. It really is.
People are becoming aware.
Yeah,
So
I'm just glad I made it through this whole interview without crying.
like you said, like you said, it wasn't a fairy tale. You didn't
No.
you didn't get the horse and the carriage. You got the pumpkin and the mice. So
Hey, that's okay. We'll make do. We'll make do. Okay.
All right, Crystal. It's been
Well,
really
thank
nice
you so
talking
much
to you.
again.
Yes, it's been
It's been a
great.
pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a good one.
All right. You take care of yourself, okay?
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.